learners, welcome back to another video on ratio analysis. I'm Listener Jose, and in this video I'm going to talk about liquidity ratios. This is a balance sheet of Walmart. What all information you will get from this? Yes, we can see the total of current asset, current liability, then fixed asset and liability. See another balance sheet of Indian Oil Corporation. Here also we can see some of the figures, right? But are you able to make a decision or analysis or an interpretation based on these figures? Suppose I am a supplier who supply goods on credit, or I am a commercial bank who is providing short-term loans to the company. Before I supply goods or lend money, definitely I will check, recheck, cross-check and verify that whether this company has the ability to repay or meet its current or short-term obligations as and when this become due. So here comes the importance of liquidity ratio. Liquidity refers to the ability of a firm to meet its current obligation or short-term obligations. The short-term obligations of a company can be met only when there are sufficient current or floating or circulating assets there. The current asset should be either be liquid or it should be near to liquidity. So now we will see the list of current asset and current liability. So you can see in this slide. The sufficiency or insufficiency of current asset is being assessed by comparing them with the current liability. If the current asset can pay off the current liabilities, then we can say that the liquidity position of that company is satisfactory. Or in other words, we can say that if current liability may not be easily met out the current asset, then liquidity position will be bad or it is not satisfactory. So, in order to measure the liquidity of a firm, the following ratios can be calculated. That is current ratio, liquid ratio and absolute liquid ratio. In this video, we will be seeing or will be discussing the current ratio in detail. The two components of current ratio are current asset and current liability. The current asset include cash and those assets which can be easily converted into cash within a short period of time. Generally we say 1 year. And current liability are those obligations which are payable within a short period of time. Generally we say as 1 year. So the current ratio shows the relationship between current asset and current liability, and it is calculated by dividing the total of current asset by total of current liability. Then how can we interpret this current ratio or the result of current ratio? The rule of thumb is 2:1. That means current asset, it should be double the current liability, then we can say that it is satisfactory or the liquidity position of that company or that concern is satisfactory. Let's take one example. Here many items are given and you are required to calculate the current ratio and you need to interpret the result. So we know that the equation for calculating current ratio is total of current asset divided by total of current liability. And now we will check each item. Stock, we know that it is a current asset, no doubt. Sundry debtors, it's a current asset. Then what about cash balance? That is also a current asset. Bills receivable, a current asset. Prepaid expense, a current asset. What about land and building? It is not a current asset. It is a fixed asset. Then what about goodwill? That is also a fixed asset. So we can't take these two items when we take the total of current asset. Then what about sundry creditors? It is a current liability. Then what about bills payable? It is a current liability. Tax payable, current liability. Outstanding expense, current liability. Bank overdraft, it is a current liability. And debenture, it's not a current liability, it is a long term liability. So we won't take the total of debenture when we calculate the total of current liability. So now we can calculate the total of current asset and total of current liability. So the total of current asset is 1,90,000 and the total of current liability is 85,000. So then we can apply these figures in the ratio, that is current ratio equals current asset divided by current liability. That means 1,90,000 divided by 85,000, which gives an answer 2.24, or we can written as 2.24:1. Then interpretation is very important, right? So how can we interpret this ratio? Yes, the current ratio 2.24 means that current asset are 2.24 times of current liability. That means it shows a satisfactory position. One question: is high ratio is always favorable to a business? The answer is no, because it may not be favorable due to following reasons. High current ratio may be because of slow moving of stock. Then the figure of debtors may go up because debt collection is not satisfactory. Then the cash or bank balance may be lying ideal because of insufficient investment opportunities. So before we reach to a conclusion, a number of factors we need to be taken into consideration, like the type of business, type of a product, then reputation of the concern, seasonal influence, and the type of asset available in a company. Suppose if a firm having less than 2:1 ratio may be having a better liquidity than even a firm having more than 2:1 ratio. This is because the current ratio measures only the quantity of current asset and not the quality of the current asset possessed by a company. Then we know that current asset minus current liability will give the working capital. The working capital position of a company means that the capital that is required to meet the day-to-day activities of a concern. So here comes another type of question that can be asked in your exam purpose from the current ratio part. So here the current ratio is 2.1 and we have given the working capital as 90,000 and we need to calculate the current asset as well as current liability. So we know that working capital is equals to current asset minus current liability. That means from the given information we can write as 90,000 equals current asset minus current liability. Since we don't know the amount of current asset and current liability, what we will do? We will take current liability as X and current asset will be 2.5x. then we can written as 90,000 equals 2.5x minus 1x. When we subtract 2.5x, when we subtract 1x from 2.5x, we will get as 1.5x. So here we need to calculate what is this x. How can we calculate that? Yes, 90,000 divided by 1.5 will give you the amount of x. So the answer is, we will get as 60,000. So which thing we taken as x? Here the current liability is taken as the x. So we can write as current liability is 60,000 and we have written current asset as 2.5x, right? So we can calculate the current asset as 2.5 into 60,000, that means 1,50,000. So the final answer is current asset is 60,000 and current liability is 1,50,000. I hope you got an idea about current ratio. In the next video, we will discuss liquid ratio and absolute liquid ratio. Till then, keep learning. Thank you.